Hey guys, what's going on? So this is actually a video that I have had a decent amount of requests to do. And so this is my lower body warm-up routine. This is all of the prep work and mobility, stability work that I do before I actually get into a leg session. So before I get into this video, I want to take a second to make something really clear, and that is that I do not think that this is the best warm-up routine for everyone to do. I think that this is the best warm-up routine for me to do because it addresses all of my specific flaws and problems within my movement. And so what I encourage you guys to do is find all the flaws and problems within your movement and then base a warm-up routine and create a warm-up routine for you, specifically based off of what your problems are. So hopefully you guys enjoy this video, and hopefully you guys can take some information and some value from it, and hopefully there's something that you guys can take and implement into your own training. First thing that I'll do when I get to the gym is I'll either hop on the Stairmaster or an Incline treadmill and just spend about 5 to 10 minutes on there just to kind of get my body temperature elevated and kind of get my mind right for the session. And then right from there, we're going to get right into the meat and potatoes of the warm-up. So as you guys probably saw there by the foot and ankle complex, I like to break up my warm-up routine into specific segments. So the first segment that I like to focus on is my feet and my ankles. And the first exercise in this little complex is going to be foot love, which is something that I discovered from Duffin. So Duffin is the founder of Kabuki Strength, and amongst many other things, he is one of the strongest athletes in the world, hands down. And one of the concepts that he has really brought to my attention is the concept of rooting at the foot and how important your feet are to all of your lifts, not just your compound lifts, but every single exercise that you do in which you're connected to the floor. Your feet are the thing that transfer energy between the floor and your body. If you guys are interested in learning more about foot rooting and how important it is, I strongly suggest you go check out Chris's content because he can explain it way, way better than I can. But this foot love drill is one of the drills that he likes to use just to kind of loosen up the feet and get all of these small, tiny, intrinsic muscles and bones and everything in your feet loosened up so that your feet are actually pliable and flexible enough to be able to root in the first place. After the foot love drill, I will get into a banded joint ankle mobilization, and this is an absolutely pivotal exercise for me. So I played 7 to 8 years of American football, and I went to a really small school that did not have a lot of kids in the school in general, but obviously even less on the football team. And so because of that, we had to play both offense and defense. So I got a lot of reps in on the football field over my time. And I was fortunate in the sense that I never suffered a major injury in the sense of a broken bone or a muscle tear or anything along those lines while I played football. But one of the injuries that I did occur more times than I literally could even count would be ankle sprains and rolling ankles and twisting ankles and things along those lines. And so because of that, my ankles are pretty much fucked, specifically my right one. And so I find that if I don't do this joint mobilization, I really can't hit full depth in my squat. Really, the purpose of this joint mobilization is to clear up any scar tissue or any obstructions that are in the joint capsule so that the joint can move freely, at least to my knowledge. But it is something that I find absolutely pivotal. As I've said, I completely need to do this exercise before I squat or I am completely screwed. The last drill in my foot and ankle complex is this banded X rooting drill, and this one has a very specific way to set it up. You need one of these really thin bands, and then you double loop it, and then you twist it in an 8 around your ankles, and then you flip one of the sides over your big toe, and then one of the sides under your little toe, and this is really a very confusing setup. But once you get that set up, all that I'm really doing is dropping into some squats, and I am holding this position. And what what this drill is forcing me to do is use my big toe and my little toe to root my foot against the ground. Hopefully you guys can tell from there, but the way that the band is set up is one end of the band is actually pulling my big toe up off the ground and the other end is pulling my little toe off the ground. And so I am trying to resist the band with my toes. And what this does is it just completely lights up my feet and gets all those tiny muscles and bones working and ready to root the floor so that I can grip the floor with a tripod foot stance and be able to generate force through it. After I finish off the foot and ankle part of my warm-up, I like to get into the spine and core segment of my warm-up. And the first thing that I do in this segment is the McGill Big 3, but I do a slightly modified version of it. So the McGill Big 3 was a term coined by Dr. Stuart McGill, who is a world-renowned expert in spinal function and rehabilitation. And he has a lot of credibility with rehabbing power lifters and strength athletes at the highest level who have suffered some really serious back injuries. And he came up with a series of exercises that he coins the Big 3 for helping to prevent spinal injury and improve core stability. Now, these 3 exercises are the curl up, which is what you're seeing here, and then the side plank, and then the final one is the bird dog. I personally like to replace the bird dog with the dead bug because I feel like it kind of accomplishes the same thing, but I feel like I can control the dead bug a little bit better, and I feel like the dead bug kind of trains my core in a little bit better position than the bird dog. Not to say that the bird dog is a bad exercise, I just personally prefer the dead bug to a bird dog. And core stability is something that I really struggle with. So I have been lazy as hell when it comes to training my core for the first probably 5 to 6 years of my training life or career, whichever term you want to use. But recently that has kind of gotten me into a position where I have suffered some injuries because of it. And I know that the core is really the root of all your movement. Really all of your movement is going to stem from the core of your body. And so this is a major focal point that I like to focus on. I do this segment of my warm-up drills not only on my lower body sessions, but my upper body sessions as well, because maintaining a stable brace is going to be important for every single exercise that there is, from a bicep curl to a squat. Usually when people talk about bracing your spine and bracing your core, they're usually referring to the big, heavy compound exercises that have an ability to injure you. And while that is obviously true, I think that it's just as important for the small isolation exercises like bicep curls and lateral raises, because I think it's important to help you get everything out of those exercises by being able to maintain a stable base. You'll also notice that when I'm doing these, I'm not really doing extensive sets and reps. Really what I'm doing is either 2 or 3 8 to 10 second holds, and that's all that I'm doing. My goal with this warm-up is to kind of turn on all the musculature in my core, but I don't want to do extensive sets and reps to fatigue my core because that's going to impact my training. My main focal point with this warm-up routine is obviously to warm up. It's not to overexhaust myself. And so because of that, I kind of like to monitor the volume and the intensity just like I do with my training. And I prefer to keep the total volume low and just keep the effort within each repetition high. After the modified version of the McGill Big 3, I get into something that I call a walking cat camel. So for those of you who are familiar with yoga, you may understand the cat camel pose, which is where you repeatedly put your spine into flexion and extension. And that is what I'm doing here, but I'm just adding a walking component to it. So I'm kind of walking my body outward as long as it will go and putting my spine into as much extension as I can possibly get. I'm dropping my hips to the floor and I'm looking up at the ceiling. I'm getting full extension all the way through my cervical spine. And then I walk back up onto my knees and I put my spine into a little bit of lumbar flexion. And really this is just kind of getting, as you can imagine, my spinal cord extended and flexed and just kind of help clear all of that area up. So from there, on an as needed basis, I will go into a Jefferson curl. So maybe or not, you guys couldn't tell from that walking cat camel, I get a lot of extension in my spine, but I don't get a lot of flexion. And so if I'm doing something like RDLs, which is what I was doing on this particular day, after I finish off these walking cat camels, I will come jump up on a bench here and grab a pair of 10-pound plates and do 3 of these Jefferson curls with like a 10 to 12 second hang. And this is just going to help me get into more lumbar flexion than what I could do with that walking cat camel. And then the weight is obviously going to help exaggerate that a little bit. The elevation on the bench is going to help me get more range of motion. So I don't always do these, but on a day where I'm doing something with a lot of movement at the spine, whether it's a hack squat or an RDL, I will throw those in. The final movement of this complex is just going to be some thoracic rotations, and I like to do these up against a wall, so I'm leaning against this mirror here, and then I am using my arms and my legs, obviously, to rotate my thoracic spine. I have previously had a lot of problems with my thoracic spine, but as I've been more and more consistent with doing these, it has really loosened up a lot. It may or may not be something that I even really need to continue to do anymore, but it only takes like 30 or 40 seconds to knock these out, and so I just kind of like to throw those in there for safe measure. The final segment of my lower body warm-up routine is the hip and adductor complex. So I spend a lot of time sitting, and because of that, my hips are very tight. And so I need to spend some time loosening up those hips and getting those hips warm before I get into any movements that load them. The first movement that I will do in this complex is the basic pigeon stretch or pigeon pose, which is what you're seeing here. What this is really focused on is opening up my hip external rotators, which is a problem that I have had literally since I have started lifting. I remember being an 8th grader and going into the gym for the first time at my high school, and the weightlifting coach telling me that I needed to do pigeon pose to wake up my hip external rotators, because spending all day sitting in class was doing nothing good for my squats. And that has just kind of continued into my daily life now. I spend a lot of time sitting. I wouldn't say that I'm sedentary, but I do spend a lot of time sitting down and kind of closing off my hips and not really using my hips a lot. So this is an absolutely essential exercise for me. Not only will I do this on my lower body days, I will do this on my upper body days as well. If you're someone who spends a lot of time sitting, there's a very good chance that your hips are tight and immobile. And while it may not be something that you necessarily feel, I encourage you to do some sort of pigeon pose like this the next time before you squat, and just kind of see if you feel a difference in your hip mobility and your ability to access a full squat. So from hip external rotation, we go into hip internal rotation. All I do for these is I really just turn over on my stomach. I contract my knees together and I try to internally rotate my hips as far as I can. So this is something that I ignored for a very long time. I spent a lot of time working on hip external rotation, and then I eventually got to the point where my hip external rotators were so much more overpowering than my hip internal rotators that I started to get some pains in my TFL. And so doing some sort of isometric hold to turn on the muscles and my internal rotation segment of my hips is really something that I find a lot of value in. From there, I go into an isometric adductor hold. So the adductors are a muscle group that I experience a lot of injuries in. I have ever since like 6th grade football. So I need to do some sort of isometric holds with my adductors. Just really helps wake up the muscles, get some blood flowing in my adductors, and gets them fired up and ready to work. So I'll probably do like 4 to 5 rounds of 10-second holds here. After 10 seconds, I just kind of take the yoga block out and I put the adductors into a slight stretch just to kind of get some movement through them. But that exercise really warms up my adductors really well to get into these Copenhagen adductors. And it's really hard to tell from this side. I have this segment of the clip sped up so that when I get into the other side, you'll be able to see it better. But this is a very, very common drill that's used in PT and rehab a lot. But this really works on eccentrically loading the adductors. So what I'm doing is I'm pulling up with my adductor, and then I'm focused on controlling the eccentric and controlling the negative on the way down. I also find that at this point, this is pretty much an essential exercise for me to do, especially with the adductor reoccurring injury. So this is something that I will do until I feel ready to get into the next segment of my warm-up. So this could be anywhere from 4 reps on a good day to 10 reps if the adductor is feeling really sore. And then the final exercise that I'll do is I'll just do some rear elevated split squats with no weight, just to kind of, again, help wake up the feet. And now that my hips and groin and everything are all woken up, this just kind of gets everything moving in unison and in sync. If this box is taken, I will just do some body weight walking lunges, and I find like that accomplishes the same thing for me.